So from a policy perspective, how is the global regulatory landscape evolving to support SAF development and adoption?
Yeah, we're certainly moving from sort of signals to enforcement is probably the way that I would look at this point in time. We're all very familiar with the United Kingdom and the European Union. Clearly, they're very robust sustainable aviation fuel mandates there. You're now seeing the trickle-down effect to the next in-line market. So recently, you've seen Australia announce a 1.1 Australian billion package to incentivize made low-carbon liquid fuels, including SAF. You're seeing the likes of India, Japan, South Korea come out with SAF mandates and targets that are going to be enforced. Clearly, I think there's a big role for government to help bridge sort of the mezzanine finance part, where you've got the upfront capital, which there generally is a fair amount available. You've got project finance, which is more for the big lenders and institutional investment players when you look to actually go and construct your facility. But in between, when you're trying to finance the design or the detailed engineering of a facility, that's often really tricky. And so the Advanced Fuel Fund in the United Kingdom is a really good example of government addressing that shortcoming. So ultimately, in synthesis, I think you're finding that governments are starting to really effectively respond to consultation from the sector and understand the specific role that they need to play to address the gaps in the market for scaling and financing the developments, which is really promising to see. And
until we find that sweet spot between collocating SAF demand and SAF production with equally strength in the same place, we end up with a supply chain that is often quite vast and quite complex as well. In building up that supply chain, what are the main challenges that you see, and how can we foster more cooperation across every party that's involved?
So from a cooperation standpoint, I think you have to take the regional approach. You have to almost hyper-regionalize the activity. I think if we start to work at sort of more sort of multilateral levels, we start to get away from the root of what we're trying to achieve here. And that's ultimately building SAF supply chains domestically in as many markets around the world as possible. Because there's often a conversation, which is true, that we can lean on book and claim to scale up SAF and allow an airline in Africa to purchase SAF in Europe or the UK or the US. And that's all well and good as a short-term goal. But I think we make ourselves far more relevant as an industry. We attach ourselves to more issues, to more stakeholders, if we make it more regionally focused.
Do you think that the sector is moving quickly enough to decarbonize, and what in particular do you think needs to accelerate?
So I do have a little bit of a reservation with that question, because I think the rate of progress in SAF is staggering. That being said, what is clear is that the market is dominated by HEFA right now, and there's no issue in of itself with HEFA, but we know that there is constraints around its feedstock. We know that there's just a finite amount of lipid-based feedstocks that are going to be able to fill HEFA facilities. And so what it really means is that in order to expedite and ensure the next wave of SAF is going to come through, we need to set specific policies that enable second generation advanced biofuels that can leverage waste-based feedstocks, regenerative agriculture-based feedstocks and the like. And so that's going to be facilitated largely through sort of greenfield facilities or first-of-a-kind technologies such as alcohol-to-jet, Fischer-Tropsch, and then even things like hydrothermal liquefaction and pyrolysis. So we need real carved out policies that help enable these next-in-kind technologies.
Are there any emerging technologies or partnerships or models that excite you in the clean aviation space?
The one thing that I'm quite bullish on is the role of book and claim. I know I spoke about promoting local domestic supply chains, which is very important, clearly. But I also think that we can do a number of very interesting things via book and claim systems. SAF is not one product, it's two, right? Your scope one, and that's effectively coming like the jet fuel component. And your scope three, if you like, on top of that, is like your decarbonisation. I'm oversimplifying, but the idea is the reason why SAF is going to consistently become more expensive than jet fuel is you're effectively paying for decarbonisation as a service. And that's where it becomes even more interesting for corporates. You could start with the scope 3 conversation via the book and claim system and work your way backwards to find a scope 1 partner in the name of an airline, for example. And so I'm really excited about the way in which this industry can use the book and claim system to become more innovative in the way that SAF procurement and purchasing takes place. It doesn't limit us to just going to the airline first to take the full package and then onwards sell the scope 3. I think we can become quite creative in the way that we do that. And of course, what that means is that the ultimate price of SAF is split among 2 customers rather than it being forced all on the top of the airline. So yeah, that's something that I'm really excited to see how it pans out over the coming years.